Early this morning, forces from 6 Caribbean democracies and the United States began a landing or landings on the island of Grenada.
American patrols continue to look for a handful of armed revolutionaries.
In the streets, there are spontaneous mass demonstrations against the United States, or what's always been called the Yankee aggressor here.
The last remnants of the Marxist dream for Grenada, more than 600 captured Cubans.
Do you believe the British should have gone in as well?
I think the British should be the ones to have gone in.
Fidel Castro was there, looking strained, betraying the fact that this was a national and personal setback.
The final decision to go ahead with the invasion was taken here at the Pentagon last night after a series of logistics meetings by senior defense men. As the invasion got underway, the Joint Chiefs of Staff began to arrive at the White House to go into session with the President. He, in turn, briefed congressmen, and it was then left to him to brief the world.
Early this morning, forces from 6 Caribbean democracies and the United States began a landing or landings on the island of Grenada in the Eastern Caribbean. We have taken this decisive action for 3 reasons. First, and of overriding importance, to protect innocent lives. Second, to forestall further chaos. And third, to assist in the restoration of conditions of law and order and of governmental institutions to the island of Grenada.
But even as the President's White House statement ended, word was reaching Washington that the invasion had not found favor in Britain.
We are, of course, always impressed with the views of the British government and Mrs. Thatcher, but that doesn't mean that we always have to agree with them.
Once again, politicians on Capitol Hill were worried about it too.
The United States foreign policy now borders on interventionism, that rather than having a coherent foreign policy based on principle, for example, human rights or free enterprise, we're now in a position where every time we see something that bothers us, we go in with a military solution.
Both houses here intend to debate the invasion fully, though the administration hopes to get the troops home before they do. President Reagan had already condemned Grenada as a Soviet, Cuban-backed threat in the Caribbean, but intelligence sources in Washington have now disclosed that a plan had existed for some weeks, if not months, before today to invade the island. The bloody coup on Grenada last week gave the president the opportunity for action. The sources say that the CIA headquarters here established a Grenada task group in early summer. Working contacts were made with Grenadian exiles in Canada and Barbados, and with some individuals actually on the island, who played an important role when it came to the invasion this morning. Then, only this June, the Americans staged a major exercise designed to demonstrate the recapturing of a Caribbean island. As American Marines landed on the island just off Puerto Rico, representatives of Caribbean states neighboring Grenada were invited to view the display. A year earlier, a similar exercise was staged off Cuba to work out methods of evacuating civilians from an island in the aftermath of a military coup. When today's invasion came, the Americans were far from unprepared. On the streets of America, reaction to today's news is still mixed. Some see it as getting one back after the Beirut disaster. Others fear America getting into another problem area from which it may again prove hard to get out. John Snow, News at 10, Washington.
On the outskirts of Paris this morning, the American Secretary of State arrived at a French Foreign Office chateau for urgent talks on the future of the multinational force in Lebanon. Britain's Foreign Secretary was there too, and when the two men met inside, Sir Geoffrey Howe raised the question of Grenada and told Mr. Schultz American consultation with Britain had been sorely inadequate. Sir Geoffrey seemed to believe his point had sunk in.
And I think we reached a clear understanding both of our anxieties and of the need to maintain effective and indeed better arrangements for consultation on such matters in the future. It's agreed that the United States forces will hopefully achieve their purpose in as short a time as is possible. And then we obviously have a common interest in seeing what arrangements can be made for the restoration of democratic government in Grenada at the earliest possible opportunity.
As for Lebanon, the four foreign ministers resolved to keep the recently stricken peacekeeping force in place, while America tries to pressure the warring Lebanese factions to reach a peace agreement by negotiation in Geneva next week. Jeffrey Archer, ITN, Paris.
They put themselves in there and they were ruling us by guns, so we couldn't say anything. Thank God they come in, the Americans, to save us.
I don't view the forces that went in as invasion forces. I view them as forces of liberation.
Liberated.
Thank God. Pray. Reagan reached just in time. Just in time, Reagan reached to free our people.
What has happened in Grenada is for the people, and I know the majority of the people are very, very pleased, because people was praying for 4.5 years for that to happen, and praise God, we are free! We are free! We are free!
Because the people really needed help.
Do you believe the British should have gone in as well?
I think the British should be the ones to have gone in. But as they didn't, well, someone had to. America probably, used the situation to get in when they did, but I think the people in Grenada are thankful that they did go.
This morning's newspapers sold briskly. Within minutes, copies of Grandma, voice of the government and the Communist Party, and the only newspaper, was snapped up, underlining here the anxiety, the anger, and the appetite for news about the Grenada crisis. There's no question of trying to hide from Cubans what's happened in Grenada. The scale of the Cuban failure and the resistance is extensively reported. The main difference is interpretation of the facts. President Reagan's speech has not been fully reported, but Cuba disputes the fundamentals of what he says.
That the warehouse and those weapons could be, probably I cannot tell you that was exactly their function, part or a dependency of the Grenadian army or militia. I don't see any strange thing in the fact that the Grenadians had the weapons stored or were prepared because they felt threatened. Facts have demonstrated that they were correct.
The Cuban government continued to maintain that the Cubans on Grenada were not an armed force. They were merely workers who, like all Cubans, are trained to fight in the militia. As such, they are now being treated as national heroes. And when diplomatic problems are ironed out and those killed and those captured are returned here, they are expected to receive a hero's welcome. Special television news bulletins from breakfast to midnight report the latest government communiques, as well as any criticisms around the world of the United States operation. In the streets, there are spontaneous mass demonstrations against the United States, or what's always been called the Yankee aggressor here. Gatherings are hastily organized by Communist Party committees. As always, this helps focus Cuban feelings in a time of crisis. It gels patriotic fervor, as well as channeling an inevitable anger. Meanwhile, families of missing Cubans wait. Pedro Leyva went to Grenada 1 year ago. Today, his family are comforted by friends. They express pride at Pedro's involvement, but anger at his disappearance. His daughter says, "We are proud of the way he acted. They are workers. They did not want to fight, just to work and help Grenada's economy." Pedro's mother said, "I have nothing to say about the American people, but that monster who's the head of their government, he's a fascist assassin." Pedro's father then said, "If you'll allow me in this moment when we do not know if my son is alive or dead, we will sing the national anthem." The words say, to die for Cuba is to live. Cuba now awaits the final official figures of how many died in Grenada. Nick Gowing, News at 10, Havana. Cuba's Deputy Foreign Minister, Ricardo Alarcón, announced that the Cuban ambassador on Grenada has been told not to obey Sir Paul Scoon's order to leave the island by 6 o'clock tonight, London time. Mr. Alarcón said the Cuban embassy was surrounded by US troops. No one was allowed in or out. 2 Cuban diplomats had disappeared while trying to locate Cubans on the island.
Our diplomatic personnel have instructions not to leave Grenada until, with the exception of women and children, until our collaborators, the people working in Grenada, including, of course, prisoners, dead persons and wounded persons, leave the island.
3 days ago, the Red Cross said Cuban dead and wounded would get here in a matter of hours. Mr. Alarcón accused America of obstructing their departure from Grenada and not cooperating with the Red Cross.
I think the conclusion is obvious. If we were told that by Monday morning the first airplane was landing in Havana, bringing part of these people, and we are now Tuesday evening, and nothing has happened, and the plane is still waiting in Barbados, something is going on that is not going well.
Are the Americans being obstructive? Is that your understanding?
I am absolutely, it's my conviction.
As Cuba began preparing its tomb for national heroes to receive the dead from Grenada, Mr. Alarcón denied US claims that Cuba plans a terrorist campaign against US interests abroad in retaliation. He called the US naval maneuvers suddenly starting off Cuba today a waste of taxpayers' money. While US pressure on Cuba mounts, the Cuban government have announced that the Cuban military commander, Colonel Tortolo, who arrived on Grenada the day before the US invasion, has evaded capture and found sanctuary in a diplomatic mission of what is called an unnamed friendly nation. Nick Gowing, News at 1, Havana. Beyond a fleet of military and civilian ambulances, the Red Cross DC-8 taxied in 3 days later than expected after diplomatic wrangling over the Cubans' return. Fidel Castro was there, looking strained, betraying the fact that this was a national and personal setback. Wounded Cubans and the dead still in Grenada are the victims of the first ever Cuban military clash with the United States. 2/3 walked off. Each received a personal welcome from Castro, his brother, who's the defense minister, and from Politburo members. They are being treated as heroes of the revolution. Some of the wounded were too ill to respond. Others waved, clearly relieved to be home after the long wait in US military custody on Grenada. The welcome was restrained, the crowd small. Fidel Castro, the Cuban commander-in-chief, stepped forward with a few words to clasp hands. No one clapped or showed any emotion. Cubans had been asked to stay away. There was no reunion with relatives at the airport. A fleet of ambulances whisked the wounded away, past a military honor guard. The Cubans did not know the names of those arriving until shortly before the plane reached Havana. Crowds lined the route into the city, ignoring official announcements, to watch the 57 ambulances pass. For a week, hospitals had been on standby to receive the wounded. As the stretchers arrived, patients and medical staff sang the national anthem. It raised the spirits of many of the wounded. There still appear to be formidable problems and delays ahead before the Cuban dead and the 600 prisoners are returned here. Only then will there be a state funeral and a renewal of mass demonstrations of anti-American feeling by the Cubans. Nick Gowing, ITN, Havana.
American forces on Grenada began winding down their presence this afternoon. More than 2,000 soldiers are being flown back to the United States, but at least 2,000 others will remain until at least the interim government has been formed. While they were leaving, it was stalemate at the Cuban embassy, where the ambassador, who's been ordered out, refuses to go until all Cubans have been evacuated. The last remnants of the Marxist dream for Grenada, more than 600 captured Cubans, are waiting to go home. In the ghetto area, where the air is filled with the pungent smell of marijuana, Grenadians who largely supported the old Bishop regime are cautious about what comes next. They claim the People's Revolution gave them hope. The question everyone here is asking is who will occupy the Prime Minister's residence.
There will be no prohibition of any party. One of the tasks of the provisional government will be to prepare the way for free elections.
Sapor will announce the government next week. It will not be made up of politicians and will probably run the country for at least 6 months. After 4 years' neglect, the old parliamentary house is a shambles. Leading Grenadians want more than just free elections.
The quickest way is to rebuild our economy. Don't send us food aid or blankets. Give us scholarships. Send us technicians and send us tourists. We have a wonderful country.
The confidence needed to bring back foreign visitors cannot be maintained until there's a truly representative government. But already there are those who helped Maurice Bishop to power, saying that with America breathing down their necks, the elections will not reflect all political opinion. Brent Sadler, News at 10, Grenada.
They arrived on a Soviet jet from an overnight stop in Mexico City. The 60 Cuban soldiers and workers who sought refuge in the Soviet and Cuban embassies on Grenada were led by Colonel Tortolo. He arrived in Grenada the day before the invasion. The colonel announced grimly to Fidel Castro his return. Behind in Grenada lay 27 Cuban dead. Some expressed their defiance. Others fought back tears. Now they were home. The military role of many arrivals was underlined by the greetings from these senior army officers, personal friends. This was a parade of Soviet bloc representation on Grenada. Along with expelled Soviet, Bulgarian and East German diplomats and their families came North Korean diplomats who shed tears, their pride dashed, as they were greeted by their colleagues based in Havana. One foreign diplomat shouted his own and his country's continuing support for Cuba. Later tonight, military planes are expected to bring the first of the Cuban prisoners home. Only then will Fidel Castro's ambassador in Grenada finally abandon Cuban presence on that tiny island. The nature of the welcome and the use of this Soviet aircraft underline in the fullest possible way the full support of the Soviet bloc for the Cuban involvement in Grenada. Nick Gowing, News at 10, Havana.
This week, the Americans have been looking into reports of a mass grave. They haven't found one, but they have discovered a spot where Maurice Bishop may have been buried. Men from the US Army Graves Registration Team have exhumed the remains of several people. A civilian cook told intelligence officers that Prime Minister Bishop was dumped in this trench and burnt. The US military commander on the island was present when the digging began and explained the importance of finding Bishop.
Well, if you've talked to a lot of the civilians around here, you'll find that Maurice Bishop was a fairly popular guy to a lot of people. He was a hero to some people here. I think for that reason you need to find his body.
No one knows for certain if this is where Maurice Bishop is buried. Because the bodies are so badly mutilated, identification will take some time. But one thing is certain, the people of this island desperately want to know exactly what happened to their leader. Brent Sadler, News at 1, Grenada. Every man, woman and child has been asked to put country before self, and on the day that the interim government was announced, that's precisely what most Grenadians were doing. Power workers have been on double shifts, restoring the island's wrecked supply cables. They've almost finished a job, which should have taken them weeks. In the fish market, the women are doing a brisk trade. No shortages of fresh supplies, because fishermen are putting in extra hours to help the food situation. There's renewed enthusiasm for work right across the island. The owner of this small business said the revolution almost cost him the trade. Exports were practically nil. Most people have high hopes for the future. As the government announcement drew near, people began tuning into their radios for the news from Government House, eager to forget the past.
I think that we would have been the slaves of the communists, because as far as I understand, Mr. Cord was in favor of having this place as a communist place.
Sir Paul Scoon emerged 2 weeks after the invasion day to announce the interim administration, which is expected to start running the country next week. Sir Paul hinted that American troops should be withdrawn as quickly as possible.
It is important that within the shortest possible time, we should live and work in a situation where security support takes the form of a police operation that would increasingly come under the command of a Grenadian or West Indian Commissioner of Police.
As he was speaking, American forces were supervising the evacuation of the last remnants of Cuban influence on the island. Diplomats from the Cuban embassy were escorted out of their compound by armed guards. They'd been ordered to leave 8 days ago. Meanwhile, in the jungle areas outside St. George's, American patrols continue to look for a handful of armed revolutionaries said to be capable of causing trouble. And in the capital, combat troops continue to make their presence felt, but in small numbers. Their complete withdrawal appears to be some way off. For the moment and some time to come, American involvement on the island is generally regarded as an agreeable courtship. But already some Caribbean observers are saying that once the country gets back on its feet, opinions may change. The American liberators, as they're called here, if they remain, may not be so welcome. Brent Sadler, News at 1, St. George's, Grenada. For the moment and some time to come, American involvement on the island is generally regarded as an agreeable courtship. But already some Caribbean observers are saying that once the country gets back on its feet, opinions may change. The American liberators, as they're called here, if they remain, may not be so welcome. Brent Sadler, Channel 4 News, St. George's, Grenada. For the moment and some time to come, American involvement on the island is generally regarded as an agreeable courtship. But already some Caribbean observers are saying that once the country gets back on its feet, opinions may change. The American liberators, as they're called here, if they remain, may not be so welcome. Brent Sadler, News at 10, St. George's, Grenada.